again and welcome. I did a whole rant about VE Day and why we had 2 minutes silence, and I've done that twice now. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but I'm not going to do it again in case you have. I'm just going to launch straight into dyeing with yarn. So, welcome. I hope everyone's okay. I know that some of you have bought our little kit. If you have, this is what it looks like here. It's got some fixative, it's got some instructions, and it's got the 4 colours in it. Okay, and it also came with 3 mini sock skeins. It's called an acid dyes kit. I just wanted to explain why it's got the word acid in there, because some people think that there's acid in it and there isn't. All right, so it sounds a lot more scary than it is. So all it means is that the yarn needs an acidic environment in which to take the dye. So the dye will attach to the yarn if it's acidic. All right. So actually, this is I think it's ammonium sulfate that they put in with this kit. What I use is citric acid, and it's food grade citric acid. It's the same stuff that you might get in lemon sherbet, or you also use it in bath forms. So that's perfectly safe, okay? And I'll talk about that in a little while. But I just wanted to explain that the acid dye kit doesn't have acid in it. That's the first thing, all right? Now, just before I start, I do want to just spend a little bit of time talking about health and safety. I do this when I run my workshop here in the studio, because I think it's really, really important, and I personally don't want to be responsible for poisoning anyone, obviously. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on that. The acid dyes, I mean, I know there's a big thing about dyeing with natural dyes and avocado skins at the moment, and that's fabulous, but the acid dyes will give you lovely, bright, vibrant colours, and it's worth using them if you want that. However, they are toxic, all right? So you know, unlike dyeing with avocado skins, obviously you're going to be fine using your saucepan that you cook your pasta in. With this, it's a no-no. So you do need to have some dedicated equipment to use these with, and I'm going to talk about heat sources and heating it all up and getting the dye to attach a little bit later on. But I just wanted to also say that when you start using them, you do need some sort of apron, probably. I mean, look at me, I always get covered. I mean, I am just a messy pup. It's just my creative nature I put it down to, but I always do make an awful mess and do get covered in everything, always. So always wear, when you've got the dyes out, always wear some attractive marigold rubber gloves, which, I mean, I hate wearing these. I hate wearing any sorts of gloves. I mean, I don't mind wearing gloves when it's cold to keep warm, but hate gardening gloves, hate these. You can use those little doctor's gloves that lots of people are doing their shopping with at the moment. Then you will also need some goggles, very attractive, and some sort of mask. If you're going to be using the powder, really you do need a mask. You know, this is just ideal at the moment, isn't it? You could come in from your COVID exercise and you don't even need to take the mask off. You can simply launch into a whole batch of yarn dyeing. So that's perfect, isn't it? So little bit of equipment that you do need to use if you're using these dyes. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to talk about, and that's really important. So I'll talk about the heating stuff in a minute, because you're going to need a steamer or a microwave or a saucepan. And again, can't be ones you use for food in the kitchen. You need a special one. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is how you prepare your yarn. So I've got some that's been soaking here. I'm not sure what you can see. You can see this, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this has literally just got citric acid in it. I'm going to show you those in a little while. Let's get those out of the way. So I can put my hands in here and know that nothing's going to happen. I've got 3 things soaking in here. The first is some wool tops. So this is just white wool tops. So I'm just going to squidge that out. And that's just been soaking in there overnight. Generally speaking, you just need to soak it for about 2 hours, I would say. And if you're using citric acid, which I buy in a big thingy, tub, you just need to use 5 grams per 100 gram weight of yarn. So you just weigh your yarn and put the citric acid in, mix it round, stick your yarn in, leave it for a couple of hours and you're done. I've also got 2 of the mini skeins in here, and you can see, I'm just going to take them both out and give them a bit of a ring. You can see that I've got some bits of pink wool around them, which looks a bit weird. So let me explain what that is. This happens with nearly all yarn. It turns into spaghetti if you don't tie it before you start to dye it. So you do need to just spend a couple of minutes with your undyed yarn and you just lay it out. I've just cut off some pieces of cheap acrylic yarn, and I've just tied them round in 3 different places. And this just stops it turning into spaghetti junction when it's in the water soaking, or after when you're rinsing it out, because it's going to get bashed about a little bit. So it's really worth doing that. Believe me, you do need to make sure that you do that. You don't need to bother doing it with wool tops because there's not really much that can tangle, unless you're doing a massive bit of it, I suppose. But I never do great big chunks of it at once. Okay, so that's been in the overnight. That's how you need to prepare your yarn. So I'm just going to lay those out one at a time. I'm going to start with the yarn. I'm going to talk to you about the yarn first, and then I'm going to talk to you about the wool tops. Have I got a question? You look like you're about to speak.
No.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm just going to lay it out here. I'm just going to move a few things out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing. I've got my 4 colours here: magenta, lemon, black and cyan, okay? So those 4 colours, you should be able to make any colours of the rainbow from, all right? I think what happens a lot when people start doing home dyeing is that they probably use too much of the dye. They use too much of the colour. And I think, and that's often something that, well, it's happened on occasion on my classes, but the first thing that I get people to do when I'm running my course is to make up a colour using hardly any of the dye, okay? So I've got some of the water that they were soaking in, the skeins here, which has got the citric acid in it, which will make the dye nice and vibrant, and it will make it attached to the yarn more easily. So I'm just going to fill up a beaker halfway full of some of that, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of one colour into it. Let's go with magenta. Let's do a little bit of pink. We like pink, don't we? And I'm just going to use a spoon that I would not be using in the kitchen, dedicated dyeing spoon. Can't see what I'm doing now. And then I'm just going to take the tiniest little bit on the end of my spoon. Okay.
Do you want to come and show us that?
Hardly
it's a tiny piece.
Any. Tiny. Just like tip of the spoon would be a good way of describing that. And I'm just going to pop that in there. Okay. Let me just put the lid back on again. I wasn't wearing my mask because I'm talking to you, but I probably would have been otherwise, all right? I think the mask wearing is most important when you're doing speckles, so I'll come on to that in a little while. But let me just show you now what happens to the liquid with just that tiny bit. See how bright that's got? It's like really quite a bright pink, all right? So I'm just going to give that a little stir around, just check it's all completely dissolved. And then I'm just going to dip the very end of the bottom of this skein into it, just so you can see how bright that is. So that's got a really lovely sort of candy pink. And obviously, I'm just going to wring it out and then I'll bring it a bit closer. I'll tell you what I am going to do, and that's just move all my beautiful white skeins out of the way so I don't drip on them, and the dyed ones.
Shall I zoom in?
Yeah, if you want. No, don't worry. No, let me come to you. All right, so you can see that's got this lovely shade of candy pink, okay? Now, if you had used a whole teaspoonful of that dye, well, it would have been a waste, you don't need to, but it would have gone way darker. And I know that some people like to do real pale pastely colours. So let me just show you again now how, if I then dilute that again, so I'm pouring more of my, you could just use water, but I've just got some of the soak, using that instead. So if I now pour half of that into some new water, let's see if we can go even paler and more pastely coloured, just by then dipping in the next bit along and see. And obviously that was a really quick dip, a very quick dip. Now can you see that? That's gone way paler now. So now I've got a really true pastel baby pink. Let me come a bit closer again. So you can see, there's the first one. there's the second one. And that was with that tiny, tiny, tiny bit of dye on the tip of the spoon. So you can see how easy it is to make it too dark and get sort of quite muddied colours if you're not careful. So if you want to keep it clean and light, and you can see now where my little sort of bits of pink wool are coming into their own because they're holding it all back together again, otherwise it would get in a right old mess. So now I want to talk to you just a little bit about mixing colours. So obviously you've got all the sort of basic primaries there. So say now I wanted to do a lilac, I would just take my cyan, my blue, okay? Again, I'd probably be wearing a mask, so I'm just going to be careful that I don't inhale this. And again, I'm just going to get the tiniest, tiniest bit on the edge of my spoon, hardly any. And I'm just going to add that to the original pink. Can you see how that's gone to a nice purpley colour? So obviously, you know, if you want to make greens, you're going to mess about with the lemon and the blue. You've got a black in there as well, so that's quite interesting to experiment with as well. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of purple, and I'm just dipping these in just for speed, just to show you to start with how this works, because it's quite nice. And then obviously if you're overlapping the colours a little bit, let's go this way. So I'm just going to dip the next bit in. Oh, look at that. Oh. Not a massive purple fan actually, but if I do go for purple, it tends to be more bluey purple than a pinky purple. Why is that? Who knows? I guess I don't like a regal purple. I like more of a hyacinth. All right, so there's a little bit of purple. And then obviously, if I then watered down that again, it would become a real pastel-y purple. And I've got some bits here which haven't dyed properly. Love that, because you want a bit of interest. So that's your dipping. And obviously you can overlap the colours and get all sorts of interesting things going on with dipping. Let me show you a skein that has been dipped. I think this was dipped here. So one end was dipped in yellow and one end was dipped in green, and you can see how they kind of overlapped in the middle bit. And then I've sprinkled some speckles on them. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. I know that's just the most exciting thing, isn't it? Now here's a nice pastel-y one that I've done, okay? And I'm going to show you how to get this effect. So obviously this is far more what they call space dyed, and you've got lots of different colours all over it. And what I tend to do here is use a paintbrush and actually paint the yarn. And I do quite a lot of this with my own yarns that I dye and sell. So I'm going to talk to you about that next. What I'm going to do though quickly is, just to make it slightly more interesting, is to just make another couple of colours up. So we've got some more colours to play with, because we can't just have pink and purple. That's way too dull. So I'm just going to get a new spoon and I'm going to do a little bit of lemon in one. So I'm just going to keep it the same colour. And again, I'm just going to put the tiniest bit in. So you can see these little pots of dye that you've got here, this powder, goes rather a long way. I might have just erred on the side of caution there. Probably haven't got quite enough. Let's go in again, just get a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, so these dye pots, this is my demo pack that I'm using here, that I use on courses. And I've barely touched it, to be honest. There's still loads of it left. Oh, the other thing I'm going to do is make green. So I'm also going to put some in this little pot here. Obviously, you'd be drying your spoon in between. You wouldn't be like just dipping it straight in. You know, like when someone double dips into the marmalade.
Can you double dip in the dye? Double dip in the dye?
Say that again.
Can you double dip in the dye?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I could go back and dip again. And you know, I only left it in there for like a millisecond. If you leave it in there for longer, obviously it's going to take up more of the dye. So your yarn is like a real receptor for it at the moment, because it's been made acidic. It's got this kind of acidic pH to it. Some people use vinegar as well, by the way. I forgot to say that. But you know, who wants to smell vinegar all day on your... I think citric acid's a good way to go. Right, so now I'm just going to add blue to one of them. Let me add to this one. To make green. Oh, look at that. So if you wanted a real limey green, you would add less of the blue and more of the yellow. If you wanted more of a teal green, you'd go more blue. Yeah, less yellow, yes.
Courtney, Fran,
hello.
Are you using cold water or warm water?
No, it's cold. It's completely cold. It's actually been sitting there all night. It's actually quite cold. because it was just in the thing that I was soaking them in the sink, in a trug. So yeah, it's really freezing cold. And that doesn't matter. It's the heat's going to get applied to it in a little while, so that will come later. So now I've got a bit of yellow, and I've got a bit of green, and I've got a bit of pink and a bit of purple, and I've got a paintbrush or 3 or 5. Okay, so let's start off by doing a little bit of painting. So think about how colours are going to butt up to each other. What you don't want is brown. Well, I mean, some people might want brown. It's not me. But, you know, if you want brown, yeah, mix them all together, just go for it. But think about how colours overlap and whether they'll work or not. So if I did put the green over the purple, it's not going to go a very nice colour. However, if I go yellow over purple, then it's going to go like that. Oh, nice. Nice, nice, nice. Let me do a bit more of it, and then I'm going to show you what's happened. And then I'd go from yellow to green, probably. If I was being sensible, I'd use a new paintbrush. And then, oh yes, look, like that. I find this all very exciting, can you tell? I do quite like doing this. I just think it's the best thing, especially when you're coming up with a new concoction and a new way of doing it. So look how quickly I've done that, you know, like a 5-year-old child. Hang on, let me just come and show you. So you can see, here's the purple that I dunked. Then I've just gone a little bit of yellow here, and it's gone into this sort of peachy colour in the middle. Then I've gone through to the green, and you've got a lovely sort of limey green. And then what I'm going to do now is maybe just split the skein apart a little bit, so that it's not, I'm not doing all one colour in all one place. And then let's get a little bit of yellow on one side, and then let's just get a little bit of green on the other side here, and then let's just put a little bit of pink in the middle here. Oh, I think that's the really, really pastel pink. Let's go purple because it's going to see it better. So you can see how you can spend ages and ages creating all these different looks. I mean, if you wanted to, the other thing you could do is just like spread the skein apart, sort of almost in a tie-dye type fashion, and fasten it off in different ways and dunk them in, which would be quicker. But you can see now that I've got different colours alongside one another, okay? And then that's basically how I did this skein here, okay? So it's just painted and dabbed. It's very relaxing. You just mix all your colours up first. This is very pastel, so I've hardly used any colour in each of the pots that I've mixed. I've literally just painted all of those together, okay? Let me just talk you through some of these other little skeins that I've got sitting here that I've made. So with this one, I think I've mixed up a blue and a green, and then I've overlapped them, and I put a bit of yellow in the middle, and then they've got some sprinkles going on. Let me just quickly look at my notes. So the other thing that you can do is, before you even start doing any of this, you could just add a little bit of the colour to your soak, and you could get an overall background colour on the whole skein before you even started to. So maybe like this pastel pink here, you get the whole skein pastel pink, and then if you wanted to, you could then start to overpaint on a pastel pink background, okay? So that's the other thing I do. So a lot of my skeins, say this one for example, am I covering? This one, when I dye this colourway, I put a very pale turquoise into the soak, and then I leave it for a bit, make sure it's taken up the turquoise, and then I start adding the other colours over the top of it. So I'll talk to you about speckles next, I think. So we've done painting, we've done dipping. So sprinkles, okay. So this is what we love, isn't it? The sprinkles. This is what you see on all of those yarns that you want to buy and lust after. All of the lovely different colours everywhere. And I've got some sprinkles here on this one that I've dyed myself that we sell. And actually this one is done using the sprinkles as well. It's just on this yarn, it just sort of bleeds. So sprinkles, if you want them to look like sprinkles and you don't want them to bleed, you need to make sure there isn't too much water in your yarn when you're doing the sprinkles. Here's a good one with good sprinkles that sprinkled well and stayed sprinkle-like, all right? So you can see that it's got an overall blue, and then I've just got this lovely sort of scattering of the pink all over it, which of course then turns parts of it purple. So that's so lovely. And you can see here on this one, the little bits of red over the top of the yellow and the sprinkles there. So it's such a lovely, lovely thing to do. And look at this skein. I mean, I'm loving it already. It looks like a unicorn. It wasn't intentional, obviously. It's just something within me that happens. I'm quite liking the white bit as well, to be honest. But anyway, I'm just going to do the sprinkles over this bit that we've already dyed. In fact, why don't I do them on the green bit, and then you'll be able to hopefully see them. Now, how do we do them is the big question. All right, so I'm just going to move those.
Shall I try and get in a little bit closer?
Yeah, this is the only bit really where you need to be a little bit closer. But I can always come and show you closer if necessary. I am actually just going to don my very attractive mask as well for this. All right, so hopefully you'll still be able to hear me when I'm talking. Right, okay. So I'm going to open, let's just use the magenta, okay. Now, what I'm going to use is an old toothbrush. The emphasis is on old. Can you still see me? Or have you? Oh, okay. The emphasis is on old, okay. Do not use, obviously, but you know, there's always one, isn't there? Let's say anyway, don't use your toothbrush that you use to clean your teeth. You would need a different one. Okay, so that's what we're going to use. Sometimes I do also use a little strainer. All right, that's another option. Again, don't use the tea strainer. You would need a separate one. All right, so just be sure that you're not using stuff from the kitchen. Same with the spoons, everything, measuring jugs, keep it all separate. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're just going to literally tap the end of your toothbrush into the dye.
So,
Comme ça. Okay. All right, just a tiny bit on the end. All right. Just going to put my mask on now. Sorry. Can you still hear me? I'm sure you can. Then what I do from quite a height is just tap the end of the toothbrush. All right. Can you zoom in on that? Can you see?
we are zoomed in.
You are zoomed in. And can you see those little sprinkles? Now, the temptation is to go, oh my God, I love it. Let's do loads and loads and loads more of those. Just wait for a minute, because they will then spread a little bit and develop a little bit and turn into probably more than you were anticipating. So don't get ahead of the game and go too crazy all at once. So I'm just going to leave it like that actually, just to show you. But if you wanted to, you could then dip your toothbrush. I always clean the toothbrush first, and before I dip it into the, obviously, another colour. Oh, to hell with it, let's do another colour. Let's do a little bit of blue.
Question while you're going, can you do this with wall tops as well?
Yes, absolutely the same. And I will just move on to the wall tops.
Sorry, that was silver birch.
Silver birch, hello. Yes, it's exactly the same deal with the wall tops, and I am going to just quickly do some wall tops as well for you. So again, I didn't put much on there. And what's interesting is that you find that the dyes behave very, very differently when you're sprinkling them. Some, I mean, it's just their makeup is different, all the different colours. So some will come out far finer, and you'll see that I don't know if you saw, but the cyan, I'll show you in a second, that cyan's gone really, really fine, like a really fine dust, whereas the magenta is far more clumpy and more speckledy and spotty. So quite interesting, but you just need to sort of learn as you go, really, and experiment. Now, whenever anyone does the speckles on my workshops, they always do too much. So you just get so excited by it, you just carry on, and you could like literally cover the whole thing in speckles, and it all gets completely out of hand. So less is more with this, and I would urge you to just try and just do a little bit and see how it works, because otherwise you might, like I've done with the blue actually there, it's pretty much covered up all of the colour underneath, although obviously it's only on the top there, so if I separate it out a bit, it looks a bit more speckledy. But this, where I've done the magenta, is actually much nicer because there's less of it.
Let me try and zoom in on that.
Have a little zoom. Okay. All right. Now, be very wary of getting this on your gloves as you're working. So I am working on an old towel here. I usually work on an old piece of oilcloth, but if you've got an old, you always need an old towel to hand anyway, and it's quite good because it sort of absorbs it. But then if you put your yarn back down on an area where there's dye. Just be aware of that, because then obviously it will transfer onto the skein that you're dyeing. All right, so I am quickly just going to move over to the wool tops now. Just usually I would then go and wash my hands in the sink, but let's not bother with that. Oh, you see, here we go. Gillian the messy pup. I've managed to get the blue on the wool tops I was going to dye, but hey, never mind. I'm just going to show you, I mean, it's exactly the same deal with the wool tops. It just behaves slightly differently. So I'm just going to dunk the whole thing in there, and now it's got blue on it. It's got a lovely shade of purple. Well, look, that's quite nice actually, isn't it? Happy accidents, we like those, happy accidents. So there we go, so that's that with the wool tops. The main difference with the wool tops is how you heat it up. So I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. But let's just do a little bit over the top. Managed to turn that bright blue now because it had blue all over it. I'm just going to get a little bit of the yellow. And let's just slop a bit of the yellow here and there. Like that. Okay. But yeah, the same deal. There's nothing different about doing the wool tops either. And also you shouldn't have a cup of tea right next to where you're working. So that shouldn't be there. So pretend that's not there. Okay, let me just remove this attractive mask now. So that's it really. You just need to experiment. But the main points just to emphasize are don't use too much dye, okay? Make sure that you've used your fixative and the pre-soak, and then just experiment with different ways. So the ways I usually teach are painting with the paintbrush, dip dyeing, overlapping colours, and speckles. And so when people come to a workshop here, we do 3 separate skeins, and I steam them as people do them, so that they leave with 3 dyed skeins. But obviously I'm not going to actually do that because I steam them for half an hour. So let's move on and talk about the heat part of it. All right, so I'm just going to move this fellow into shot here. Oops. Now, when you're using acid dyes, you need to fix them with some sort of heat, all right? The way that I have found to be most effective on a small scale is using a steamer. The steamer's great because you're not immersing the yarn into a liquid. It's great because if you buy one of these, you get 3 tiers. But as you can see, I've written dyeing across the front of it. It's got to be one you just use for dyeing. Do not use the one that you use to make the dinner. Okay, I've said that a number of times now. I'm not going to say it again. So these are brilliant. They are £20–25 from places like Robert Dyas, all the usual online retailers that I'm not going to mention. But they're very easy to get hold of, and they're very reasonably priced. And the way it works is you put the water in the bottom, and then they've got a drip tray like that, and then they've got 3, well, mine have got 3 tiers, the ones I use, and they just sit on top of each other like that. So when I've finished my dyed skein, I very carefully place them into the steamer, and then I fill it up with lots of skeins, and then I put it on for minimum 20 minutes, maximum 30 minutes, and you pour the water in the bottom and it just steams them basically. I always keep the door shut because it smells a bit, not really badly, but you do get a bit of a smell from it. So that's my favourite method. Now, I've also done it using a microwave, and I just bought, I was going to buy a second-hand microwave. I ended up just buying a new one that was really cheap. You can get a cheap microwave, and it doesn't need to be a particularly big one. So that's another option. However, the microwave dyeing is a little bit easier. It's a little bit less easy to control. And you do need to kind of protect the yarn more and make sure it doesn't burn. So you don't really want to be microwaving it on 800 or 900 watts. You kind of want to be doing it on a lower setting, and you need to make sure that the dye has fixed. Now, the only way to do that in a microwave is to go and sort of do it for 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, take it out, and then squeeze it and see if any of the liquid runs clear. If the liquid runs clear, it means the yarn has absorbed all of the dye. If you've still got lots of dye colour in the liquid, it means it hasn't absorbed it all and you need to do it for a bit longer. When I first started using the microwave, I used to use cling film, which is obviously not something we want to be using these days. So it's probably better to get one of those special microwave dishes with a lid. and have a little bit of water in the bottom of it. So again, you're creating a steam, a bit like you are in here. And that's definitely the best way to fix it. If you haven't got a microwave or a steamer and you don't want to shell out for one, the other option is stovetop. You just need an old saucepan or an old stovetop steamer, which is again ideal. So you can have a little bit of water in the pan, you know, like you would steam your vegetables, you're just putting it in that bit above. Question.
Lisa Helsing. Can you put several skeins into each part of the steamer, or will the dye transfer? You've
got to be a bit careful because sometimes the dye will transfer, especially or usually when you've done the speckles. Because when you've done the speckles, you've got the raw dye. You see how so little goes such a long way. It's so strong, the colour, that if you've got little bits of that sitting on your skein and then touching another skein, which is a completely different colour, yes, it is a bit of an issue. However, I manage on the whole to put 10 skeins, I think it is. No, hang on. However many people I have on the workshop, I think it's 10 at once. So I sort of do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this fit another one in. Oh no, sorry, I've got 2 steamers. But yeah, I managed to do it without them touching. You don't really want them touching if they're different colourways. If you're doing 10 skeins of the same colourway, it's not so much of an issue. But yeah, I do. And then when I'm doing fatter skeins, like if I dye a lot of super chunky yarn. So if we're doing that, we would probably only manage to fit like 1 or maybe 2 of those in here at once. So yes, you can fill them up. The other thing to consider is that this top one gets slightly less heat and steam than down at the bottom here where it's more intense. So sometimes what I do is, I'm so pedantic, you probably don't need to do this, is I take the ones that have been at the top and I just do them for another couple of minutes on their own just to make sure they're cooked and that the dye has taken.
Kerry Zupp did ask what make is your steamer, and I can see it's Russell Hobbs.
Oh, lovely. There we go. I've got a different one in there as well, made by someone else. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Get the cheapest one. It doesn't need to have any knobs or whistles on it. I mean, it just needs to be, it's such a simple technology, you don't need to spend much on it. All you need to think about is the capacity and how many skeins you're going to be dyeing.
Katie Cox at home, maybe getting ahead of herself here. When it's finished and dried, can you go back and dye it some more?
You can, and I have done that because I've dyed, it hasn't happened very often, but I did dye a couple of skeins a while ago that I didn't like. So obviously I had to make them darker. You can't make them lighter. But yeah, absolutely, you can just over dye something if you don't like it.
Dye double dip.
That's definitely double dipping, isn't it?
I'm sure I knew a bloke from Cardiff called Dye Double Dip.
So what I was going to say, about stovetop dye, yes, with the saucepan. So the only thing about that is, a steamer's great, but if you've literally just got a pan, a lot of people do a pan. Obviously, it's ideal if you're just going in with one colour. If it's just one colour, perfecto, and you know, you can paint it and then stick it in, and it doesn't matter if it's sitting in water. By the nature of the beast, it's going to kind of muddy different colours together a little bit, potentially, especially with the old speckledy speckle thing. So just be aware of that. I mean, if possible, you don't want to completely immerse the whole thing in liquid if you're just doing it in a pan on the stove top. Okay. So, yes, go ahead, caller.
Lulu Kachu, is there any reason I can't use a bamboo steamer?
There is no reason. As long as you don't use it for food, you can go right ahead.
Could it hold any of the dyes, do you think?
It probably will. You'll probably end up dyeing your bamboo steamer, I would imagine.
But next time you use it, would it transfer? Do you think it might transfer?
Not if you gave it a good scrub. Probably not. I mean, in the same way as I've dyed my paintbrushes. So that paintbrush used to be white, creamy white. Now it's blue, but I just rinse it out and it's fine. The dye doesn't come out of it. I've just dyed it and that's it. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, just give it a jolly good wash before you reuse it and then it should be absolutely fine. So moving on then. So pretend that you have then steamed for 20 to 30 minutes. Where's the one I was doing? Oh, I put it in there. It disappeared. And then obviously, they're going to be extremely hot after they've steamed for half an hour. So I turn the steamer off, I wait a few minutes, and then wearing the rubber gloves, I very, 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 very carefully take the yarn and then just lay it out on the sink or the draining board to cool. Now, it's really, really important that you don't then rinse the yarn while it's still very, very hot. Not an awful lot would happen to this because it's superwash yarn. But if you're using the kids' silk mohair, for example, that I dye a lot of, or another yarn that's got a big wool content and isn't superwash, you will felt it by mistake if you don't wait until this is cooled down. This is particularly the case with the wool tops. So more important with the wool tops, because this is intended for felting. It will felt at the drop of a hat if you poke around with it or rinse it out while it's still hot. Okay, so it's so, so important that you just wait until this is completely cool to room temperature. And then you need to rinse it in the same temperature, cool room temperature. So no extremes of temperature. You've heated it up, you've let it cool again, and then rinse it out in a cool water. And you're just going to gently rinse with these things until the water runs clear under the tap. And as soon as the water runs clear, you know there's no excess dye. There shouldn't be a lot anyway. It will only be the sprinkles, really, the speckles, that cause you to have a lot of excess dye. The rest of it should really have been absorbed by the yarn. Especially if you've pre-soaked it properly. So just make sure that it's left to room temperature, and then you can rinse it out, and then you're just going to leave it to dry. And then obviously once it's dry, you're going to then remove the little woolly bits that are holding it all together. So you would just untie these, and then you're left with your lovely dyed skein. And I'll just quickly show you how to then make it look like it should in a little skein. So one finger, one thumb through each end of the skein, like so. Let's do it with thumbs. And then just twisting in opposite directions until you get to the point where it's just so tight and taut you can barely twist it anymore. And then bring them together, okay? It may look a little bit of a mess. Push one half through the other half, then take the other end and then just even it out, okay? And that's how you twist it into a lovely, attractive little skein like that. And then it's ready to use. I mean, obviously with a skein, you've then got to wind it into a ball if you're going to knit with it or crochet it. But that's all there is to it, folks. It's so straightforward. It's just so delightful and such good fun and so creative, and you can just have fun with it. The only thing I'd say is be careful not to use too much dye and don't end up with them all looking like the depths of the sea, brown and like really, really dark colours. And just start off with the pastels and work. If you want really, really strong, rich, vibrant, intense colours, just do it gradually and don't sort of go for it and put too much in all at once, would be my advice. So if you want to have a go with this, we've still got some packs left. I think it's something like £22-ish for this, and you get 3 of the little sock skeins with it, so that gives you enough to sort of experiment with in the same way that you would on the course that I run in the shop. Then if you really enjoy that and want to do more, let me just show you the other undyed yarns that we sell. This is my fave. This is, let me come up closer. This is a sock yarn. Again, it's superwash, but I don't know if you can see, it's got silver specks in it. It's got silver stellina, I think it's called, spun into it. So it's like already got fairy dust all over it, basically. And then we also sell that without the silver sparkles, just a plain ordinary. And these are 100 grams. So this is quite a significant amount of yarn. You'd definitely be able to do something good with if you're knitting or crocheting it. And then we also sell a 20-gram skein of my favourite kids silk mohair. Okay, it's price-wise, I think this one is £4.50. I think that's £9.95 maybe, and I think that's £10.95. And I think the little ones are £2.95 or something. Yeah.
I have a few questions.
A few?
A few.
Yes.
First is from Katie Cox at home.
Yeah.
What comes in the packet? Is it citric? Citric acid included?
No. So I said right at the beginning, I said that it comes with it's ammonium sulfate, which is similar. So yeah, here we go. Ammonium sulfate. It's very similar to citric acid, but I use citric acid instead. You're just creating an acid environment for the yarn. Some people use vinegar, but obviously that's quite smelly. This is better. This is fine, the stuff it comes with. But if you want to then carry on doing more, I do recommend using citric acid.
Tandy Langton, if I knitted something in an undyed wool and then dyed it,
Ooh.
Do you think it would shrink? Obviously, I would allow it to go cold before washing it.
So yarn will only shrink if it's hand wash only yarn. So wool tops will shrink, okay, because this is it in its raw state. It's just wool and it wants to shrink. If it's superwash yarn, it means that each of the little fibres has been coated in a special something or other to stop it from shrinking. So it needs to be superwash yarn if you don't want something to shrink. Otherwise, it will always shrink given the chance. And the way wool shrinks is through extremes of temperature and friction. So you rinsing colour out of something you've dyed in hot and cold water will make it shrink. If you'd already knitted the jumper in a hand wash only yarn, you need to be extremely careful. You can heat it up, a bit like the wool tops. You can heat it up, you let it cool again, and then you need to be really, really careful when you rinsed out. It would be quite scary doing that, because if you'd spent all the time knitting it, you know, to then dye it and then have it shrink would be quite gutting, wouldn't it? It would probably be better to dye the yarn first and do it the other way around. And then you know that you can just hand wash the sweater and yeah, that's the way I would do it.
I think you've just answered Sarah Brown's question, which was, what does superwash mean?
Yeah, superwash, that means that they coat each little fibre so that it doesn't shrink, which is very, very clever. And a lot of the sock yarns are like that. So, or anything that you would expect to have to wash, you know, a lot of yarn these days is. I mean, we do sell quite a lot of yarn downstairs that is just hand wash only. That's just like beautiful merino, alpaca, you know. But if you're knitting socks, you do want to be able to wash them, don't you? Yeah.
Lulu Kachu, can I dye any old wool that's already been dyed?
I expect so, yes. As long as you soak it in the pre-soak first and give it that kind of acid environment in which to take the dye, then yes. But obviously, if it's already a dark colour, you're going to have trouble dyeing it anything other than darker. That's the thing to remember. So, you know, if you've got, I don't know, red yarn, it's going to be hard. You'd be able to make it purple, or you'd be able to make it navy blue or black, but you wouldn't be able to make it yellow.
Would it not shrink as well when you fixed it?
Look, none of these will shrink unless you give them the environment in which to shrink. This is the ultimate shrinker of all. So if you want to dye wool tops, you need to make sure it's not going to shrink if you want to then use it for felting or spinning. So any other yarn that's hand wash only would be susceptible to shrinkage in the same way that wool tops is. You've got to wait till it's cooled down after it's come out from the dye being fixed before you gently rinse it, and then it shouldn't shrink anymore.
Lynn Shackleton, if I dyed wool tops and spun, would crocheting something with it, would it be likely to shrink if I washed carefully?
Well, after you've crocheted it?
Presumably, yeah.
No more so than it would with any other hand wash yarn. So, you know, if you're taking wool tops, dyeing it, spinning it, you're going to end up with a yarn that's probably exactly the same as any other hand wash, you know, like our Mrs. Moon that we sell, for example, which is essentially exactly the same thing. They've taken wool tops, they've dyed them, and they've spun them into a yarn that we sell downstairs. It's the same thing. If you're doing that yourself, it's the same thing. It will shrink very easily, but there's no reason for it to shrink any more than one that you've bought, if that answers that.
Jack6683, does the yarn need to be 100% wool?
No, so the sock yarn that I've just been dyeing is 25% nylon. It needs to be an animal fibre really to be using the acid dyes with, but I'd say you could probably, you know, have a 60-40 mix even. It doesn't need to be 100%. It certainly doesn't have to be 100% wool. So this yarn that I dye is 70% alpaca, 20% silk and 10% cashmere. And obviously the kid silk mohair, they're all mixtures. This one that I dye is a mohair. So anything that's an animal protein, an animal fibre. If you want to dye cotton, then you would use something called reactive dye. It's completely different. So you can't use this on fabrics that are made of cotton. This is for animal protein. So silk, wool, you know, alpaca, anything like that, mohair, is perfect for. So if it does have a little element of nylon in it, that's absolutely fine. It just can't be the other way around. So you can't, I mean, you probably could dye some Starcraft acrylic with it. I've never really tried, but certainly if it's 50-50, that would be fine. One thing I will say is that if it's superwash, it tends to take the dye more. So it makes it even brighter for some reason if it's superwash yarn than if it's not superwash.
Nicola Flynn asked if this video will be saved. She missed the beginning.
Yeah, well, maybe you did miss the beginning, but we had loads of technical problems. So yes, it will be saved, and as long as we press the right buttons when we finish. But yes, it will be saved, won't it, Chris?
Yes, Gillian.
Okay, so is that it? Have I got any more questions? I'm just looking at my notes. Do I need to say anything else?
Kerry's up.
Yes.
She'd like to buy your apron.
No, it's a one-off, sadly. It's a work of art, isn't it? But I'm sure I could recreate another one for you very easily by literally just spending the day in here dyeing yarn and wiping it all over myself. But what I do is when I've done my speckles, I actually don't wipe it on there. I go like that. I'm just the worst. I mean, how I have managed to wash my hands sufficiently during the coronavirus thing is just beyond me, because it's just not my forte. Look, I've even managed to get a bit of blue dye on that skein that I haven't even touched. So I just need to be really careful. I'm such a messy person. I just have to make such an effort to keep everything away from the wrong colours.
Very Grayson Perry, she says.
Yes, did you watch Grayson Perry? I was going to mention him. If you haven't watched it already, do tune in. Can't remember, what's it called? Grayson Perry's Arty Crafty show or something, art show or something. It's on Channel 4 and it's just wonderful. And I love Grayson Perry, and I actually want to go and stay in his studio and just like live there and put things in his kiln and make things. It's so cool. But yeah, and it's so comforting actually when I watched that programme. I was watching it last night because I saw what a mess his studio is. I find that so comforting because, you know, that by nature, that is kind of how I am. Very creative, but I don't mind little piles of mess everywhere. If you looked around the studio, you would know what I mean. So yeah, it's very comforting to know that it's just the way I am. What can I say? Right, any more questions? Oh, right, so next Saturday, hopefully, all being well, I am going to do let me just move this out of the way so I don't dye everything pink and blue. I am going to be doing, oh, just before I show you that, these are still for sale, some of these. I brought up some of my hand-dyed skeins just in case you were interested. I think I've already showed you them. I've still got this one for sale, which is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. You're all going to dye your own now, but you know, just in case it goes horribly wrong, you can buy mine as well. This one's called Hey Big Spender. This one is called Birdhouse in Your Soul. They're all named after songs, my yarns. And this one's called It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. Those are the ones that are still for sale at the moment. I haven't had a chance to dye any more recently. Just let me grab all of these things here. I will do, but I don't know when. It's just been quite busy with all you lovely people keeping us going and buying lots of things on our website, which I'm forever thankful for. Thank you. So yeah, when I get a chance, I will dye some more yarn because I do love it. Right, next Saturday, I'm going to be doing my live tutorial on wet felted landscapes with needle felted embellishments using hand-dyed wall tops. Now, hopefully you'll have all completely mastered hand dyeing your own wall tops by next Saturday. However, if you haven't, we have just had a delivery of these beautiful, sumptuous, incredibly soft Malabrigo newbie wall tops. And their wall tops, they for some reason are so soft. They're incredible. Now these are beautiful because in each skein that you buy of the wool tops are so many colours, and they just have something about them, the Malabrigo ones. I mean, I have dyed my own wool tops, which tend to be neon pink and neon yellow when I do it. But theirs are kind of more inky, I'd say would be a good word to describe their wool tops. And they are just perfect for doing landscapes, especially some of the colourways, as you can see, the greens and the blues. So these are for sale now on the website. We used to split them up into smaller packs, but I've decided to sell them as they are, just so you can get a bit more for your money. I just think it's better to have a bigger thing of it. So this one, in case you're interested, I've just picked 3 off the shelf. This is Boreal, which I think is named after the Borealis Northern Lights. This one is called Piedras, which is lovely. It's sort of, just very Tuscany. And this one is very sort of Caribbean. This one's called Solace. So beautiful, the blues and the greens. Plus there's loads of others as well. I've just brought 3 up to show you. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll be talking you through wet felting and then needle felting on top to create detail, which you see will come through the back. I've got a few more here to show. Go on. Yeah.
Red fern, are they suitable for spinning?
Yes, absolutely. So they are ideal for felting or spinning. Yes. And they're 113 grams or 4 ounces in each thingy. They are hand dyed in Uruguay, these. And Chris and I actually went to their building where they do it when we were in Uruguay a few years ago, and it's absolutely fascinating. They dye it all in massive, great big vats of dye, like big steaming cauldrons that they kind of mix. It was incredible, wasn't it? Well, I thought it was. Chris was like, what are we doing here? Right, so there's a few more here to show you. Landscapes. This one I've needle felted a bit more. Can you see the bit that comes through to the back is the bit I've needle felted on afterwards? So you can see I've just added quite a lot more. This is some of my own hand-dyed neon. And then this is some of the Malabrigo that I've used.
Polly Olivia Cox, is there a starter pack for next week's felting?
Not a starter pack as such. What I would recommend that you get is you're going to need a bamboo mat and some netting. Okay, so we have a mini bamboo kit, which is a miniature one, which is like sort of yay big, if you just want to do a little picture. Or we sell our larger bamboo mat and net, if you want to do a bigger picture. Or we sell a starter rainbow felt making kit, which comes in a muslin bag, which is another option. I'll show you the large mat. I've got it here actually. That's the big mat, okay? That's what comes in the starter rainbow kit. And if you get the starter rainbow kit, then really you just need to get some other colours of wool tops that you'd like to use. You could use plain normal colours, but I am going to be talking about these hand-dyed ones and how you can use them in the landscape, because I think they work really, really well. And then you could get our needle felting starter kit. So that is a piece of foam, 4 needles and some wool tops, or you could just buy them separately. We sell the foam and we sell the felting needles separately, and that's what I'm going to be using to add the little details on after you've wet felted, if that answers that question. So not a starter pack as such, because there's so many variables, but you need a wet felting starter kit, needle felting equipment and some wool basically for that. I'll put a post up saying what I'm going to use. All done and dusted. Any more?
Would the small kit be suitable for the size of the pick you're showing?
Yes. If you wanted to use the mat's about so big and it shrinks. So this has been done, you could use this one in a mini mat. If you want to do something more like, no, it's not very good examples or for pictures, sorry. But yeah, if you want to do something a bit bigger, then you would use the larger mat that I've just showed you. And the larger mat's good for doing scarves, which I did a tutorial for a few weeks ago. Cobweb scarves or larger bags and things like that. So it's quite a good investment if you want to get the larger one. And we do a book kit combo where you can get the felt making starter kit and my book Complete Felt Making, and you get it for a reduced price. that's another option, but you still need the needle felting stuff as well. Does that answer everybody's questions? Sorry about the technical problems earlier, and thanks for bearing with on that. And have a lovely VE day if you're doing anything for that. I'm not personally, but I know lots of people are. Or actually, maybe just do some yarn dyeing now if you've got the little pack. So yeah, if you haven't got the pack and you're thinking you might like it, there's only a few left actually, and I've ordered more, but the people that I buy these from are interminably slow at sending them to us. We will have more if we run out. And that comes with the 3 little skeins that I've been demoing with. Okay, over and out then in that case. I shall see you all again soon. Cheerio, bye.